I love you.
I love you too.
She kissed her husband goodbye at the airport on a quiet Tuesday morning, watched him roll his suitcase through the sliding glass doors, and drove home believing he was on his way to Chicago for 3 days of meetings he had been talking about for over a week. She had no reason to think otherwise. He had packed his good suit, printed his boarding pass the night before, and kissed her forehead the way he always did before a trip. What Emma Carter did not know was that 10 minutes after she pulled away from the curb, her husband Daniel walked right back out through a different terminal exit, climbed into a car that was not a shuttle to his gate, and disappeared into a part of his life she had never been allowed to see. And less than an hour later, stranded on the side of a highway with her hazard lights blinking, she would catch a glimpse of him passing by. He would see her too, and he would keep going. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. This is the story of a marriage that looked, from every angle anyone could see, like the kind of love people spend their whole lives hoping to find. Emma and Daniel Carter had been together for over 15 years, married for 12 of them, and to their friends and family, they were the couple other couples measured themselves against. Emma was the one who remembered everyone's birthday, who hosted Thanksgiving every year without being asked, who believed that love was something you built quietly, day after day, through patience and loyalty. Daniel was charming in the way that made strangers like him within minutes, the kind of man who could walk into a room and somehow know exactly what to say to put people at ease. Together they had weathered job losses, a difficult few years when Daniel's business nearly folded, and the kind of ordinary hardships that either break a marriage or make it unbreakable. Emma had always believed theirs had become the second kind. What Emma did not know, what she could not have known, was that somewhere over the last year, something in Daniel had started to shift. It was not one single moment. It was not a fight or a betrayal she could point to and say that was when it started. It was smaller than that. It was the late nights at the office that stretched a little longer than they used to. It was the phone he had started keeping face down on the kitchen counter, a habit so subtle that Emma noticed it the way you notice a clock ticking in a room you've lived in for years, present but easy to tune out. It was the new gym membership, the new cologne, the way he had started taking calls in the garage with the door shut. None of it seemed like evidence of anything. It just seemed like a man going through a phase, the kind of restlessness Emma assumed every marriage hit eventually, and quietly survived. The truth was that Daniel had met someone. Her name was Sophia Reed, 35 years old, full of the kind of spontaneous energy that Daniel told himself he had been missing without ever admitting what that really meant. Sophia did not know about Emma, not at first, and when she eventually did learn that Daniel was married, she told herself the same things people in her position often do, that it was complicated, that he was unhappy, that it was not really her responsibility to ask too many questions. Daniel had built an entire second version of his life around the lie of business trips, late meetings, and conferences that did not exist, and he had built it carefully enough that for a long time, nobody noticed anything was wrong at all. The business trip to Chicago had been planned for weeks, or at least that is what Daniel told Emma. In reality, there was no conference, no client meeting, no hotel room booked under the company's name. There was only Sophia, and 3 days that Daniel had quietly carved out of his life to spend with her, while his wife believed he was somewhere else entirely. He had rehearsed the details in his head, the way a man rehearses a story he is afraid of forgetting. The name of the hotel, the supposed schedule of meetings, even a fake itinerary he had shown Emma the night before, just so she would not ask too many questions. Emma had looked at it for exactly 4 seconds before telling him to have a safe flight. She trusted him. She always had. On the morning of the trip, Emma woke up before her alarm, the way she always did when something mattered to her. She made coffee, packed a small bag of snacks for the road in case Daniel got hungry before his flight, and waited by the door while he finished getting ready. The drive to the airport was easy and familiar, filled with small talk about what to do with the dog while he was away, and whether Emma should reschedule her dentist appointment to Thursday instead of Friday. When they pulled up to the curb, Daniel leaned over and kissed her, the same kiss he had given her hundreds of times before, and told her he would call once he landed. Emma watched him walk through the sliding doors, suitcase rolling behind him, until she could not see him anymore. She had absolutely no idea that he had no intention of getting on a plane. 10 minutes after Emma pulled away from the curb, Daniel walked through a different exit on the opposite side of the terminal, the suitcase still rolling behind him, his heart beating a little faster than he wanted to admit. A car was waiting for him, arranged the night before under a name that was not his own, and he climbed into the back seat with the kind of nervous excitement that made him feel both guilty and alive at the same time. He called Sophia almost immediately, his voice dropping into the warmer, lighter tone he only used with her, a tone Emma had not heard from him in longer than she realized. He told the driver where to go, settled back into the seat, and allowed himself for just a moment to believe that nothing could go wrong. Meanwhile, less than 30 minutes after leaving the airport, Emma's car began making a sound she did not like, a low grinding noise that grew louder the longer she drove. By the time she made it onto the highway, the check engine light had flickered on, and within a few miles the car began losing power entirely. She managed to steer it onto the shoulder just as it gave out completely, her hazard lights blinking weakly against the gray morning sky. Frustrated and a little shaken, she pulled out her phone and called Mike Benson, the mechanic who had serviced their cars for nearly a decade and who Emma considered less of a business contact and more of an old family friend. Mike told her he would send someone out within the hour and to sit tight. Emma sighed, leaned her head back against the seat, and watched the traffic crawl past her in the rearview mirror, completely unaware of what was about to happen next. As Daniel's car merged onto the same stretch of highway, he glanced idly out the window the way people do when they are lost in their own thoughts, and that is when he saw her. A familiar car, hazard lights blinking, a woman standing beside it with her arms crossed, phone pressed to her ear. For one full second, his entire body went cold because there was no mistaking it. That was Emma's car. That was Emma. Stranded on the side of the road less than an hour after he had told her he loved her and promised to call once he landed in Chicago. For exactly 3 seconds, Daniel had a decision to make, and in those 3 seconds, his mind moved faster than it ever had before, running through every possible outcome of stopping the car. If he stopped, he would have to explain why he was not at the airport. If he stopped, he would have to explain the car he was in, the driver, the direction he was heading, none of which had anything to do with a flight to Chicago. If he stopped, the entire structure of the life he had built over the last year would collapse in a single conversation on the side of a highway. And so, in less time than it takes to take a breath, Daniel made his choice. He lowered his head, turned his face slightly toward the window on the opposite side, and quietly told the driver to keep going. Emma, distracted by her phone call with Mike, never noticed the car or the man inside it. She had no idea how close she had come to seeing the truth, and how easily her husband had chosen to drive right past her. That evening, after Emma's car had been towed and repaired, and she was finally settled back at home, her phone lit up with a video call from Daniel. She answered with relief in her voice, eager to tell him about the day she'd had, and he appeared on the screen looking tired but smiling, telling her about a long day of meetings in a conference room with terrible coffee. Emma laughed and told him about her morning, the car breaking down, the tow truck, the whole frustrating ordeal. And then, almost as an afterthought, she mentioned something strange. She told him that while she was waiting for Mike's truck to arrive, she could have sworn she saw someone who looked exactly like him riding past in the back of a car. She said it lightly, the way people mention odd coincidences, expecting nothing more than a laugh in response. Daniel felt his stomach drop, but he forced a small laugh anyway, telling her that he must have a doppelganger running around the city because he had been sitting in a conference room all day with at least a dozen witnesses who could confirm it. Emma smiled and let it go, the way she let most things go when it came to Daniel, because doubting him had never once crossed her mind as a habit worth forming. But then behind him on the screen, she noticed something. A shadow shifted along the wall in the background, the kind of movement that suggested someone else was in the room with him. Emma tilted her head slightly and asked if someone was there. Daniel glanced behind him, his expression flickering for just a moment, before he answered that it was only the television. Nothing more. Emma nodded and accepted the explanation easily. But somewhere in the back of her mind, A small, quiet thread of doubt had been pulled loose, one she would not even recognize until much later. Over the following days, Emma began noticing small things she might have once brushed aside without a second thought. When Daniel called from what he claimed was a hotel conference room, there was no background noise at all, no hum of conversation, no clinking of coffee cups, nothing but unnatural silence. When he told her he was eating dinner alone at the hotel restaurant, she could swear she heard laughter in the background, the kind of laughter shared between two people who knew each other well. None of it was enough to accuse him of anything. It was simply enough to make Emma feel, for the first time in their marriage, slightly unsettled in a way she could not quite name. The real crack in the story came from an unexpected place. Mike, while replacing a part in Emma's car a few days later, mentioned casually that his cousin worked logistics for the same company Daniel claimed to be traveling for, and that as far as he knew, the company had not sent anyone to Chicago in months. He said it lightly, without any suspicion behind it, simply making conversation while he worked on the engine. But Emma felt something tighten in her chest the moment he said it, a feeling she could not immediately explain. She told herself there must be some misunderstanding, some department Mike's cousin simply was not aware of. But that night, lying awake next to the empty space where Daniel would normally be, she found herself replaying the past few months in her mind. The late nights, the phone always turned face down, the sudden new attention to his appearance, all of it arranging itself into a picture she had refused to look at directly until now. Emma did not set out to become a detective. She simply started paying closer attention to the details of her own life, the way anyone does when something quietly stops adding up. She noticed a receipt in Daniel's jacket pocket for a restaurant neither of them had ever been to. She noticed in a photo Daniel had posted of himself supposedly working late at the office, a faint reflection in his sunglasses on the desk beside him, a reflection that did not match the office at all. And then, almost by accident, a notification appeared on their shared email account, a receipt from a rideshare company for a trip that began at the airport on the very day Daniel claimed to have flown to Chicago. Emma stared at the screen for a long time before she finally allowed herself to understand what she was looking at. There had never been a flight. There had never been a conference. There had only ever been a lie, carefully built and carefully maintained, and she had believed every part of it without question. When Daniel returned home 3 days later, suitcase in hand, prepared to slide back into his normal life the way he always did, Emma was waiting for him in the kitchen. She did not yell. She did not cry. She simply placed the receipt, the photo, and a printed copy of the rideshare confirmation on the table in front of him, and watched as the color slowly drained from his face. Daniel opened his mouth to explain, to offer some version of the truth that might soften what was coming, but Emma raised her hand gently and stopped him before he could speak. She did not ask him about the affair. She did not ask him who Sophia was, or how long it had been going on, or any of the questions he had been bracing himself to answer. Instead, she asked him only one thing. She asked him whether, when he drove past her on the highway that morning, stranded and alone, he had even considered stopping. Daniel said nothing. He had no answer prepared for that question because it was not the question he had expected, and it was not one he could explain away with a clever excuse or a well-rehearsed lie. Emma watched him sit there in silence, and in that silence she finally understood the truth of everything that had happened. The affair was not really what had broken something inside her. It was the choice he made in that single moment on the highway, the moment he saw her in trouble and decided that protecting his secret mattered more than helping his own wife. That was the betrayal that mattered most. Not the lie about the business trip, not even Sophia. It was the 3 seconds in which Daniel chose himself and chose his secret over the woman who had spent over a decade believing in him completely. In the weeks that followed, Emma did not need anyone to tell her what to do next. She had already made her decision the moment she asked that question and watched her husband fail to answer it. She packed her things slowly, without anger, without dramatic confrontations, simply with the quiet clarity of a woman who finally understood her own worth. Daniel tried more than once to explain himself, to offer apologies that arrived far too late to matter, but Emma had already moved past the need for his explanations. She did not leave because she had discovered a single lie. She left because she had discovered exactly how easily he was willing to drive past her when she needed him most, and no apology could undo the truth of that choice. Looking back on everything that happened, the lesson Emma carried with her was not about suspicion or jealousy or the dangers of trusting too easily. It was something simpler and far more important. Trust is rarely destroyed by a single lie. It is destroyed in the quiet moments nobody else ever sees, the moments where someone chooses to protect themselves instead of protecting the person who loves them. Daniel did not lose his marriage because Emma caught him in a lie. He lost it because, in the one moment that truly mattered, he chose to keep driving.
What would you have done if you were in Emma's position? Would you have noticed the signs sooner, or would you have trusted just as completely as she did? Let us know in the comments below, and if this story kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure you are subscribed because there are many more stories like this one still to come.